I wonder what education's going to look like in the future. I wonder what it is that children need now in education for their future. If you think about all the developments that have taken place over the last 50 years, it's obvious that the children that are in infant school at the moment are going to need totally different skills by the time they're adults. I'm 64 and I can remember when I was a teenager at school being taken to visit a computer. We went to visit a computer because it was brand new. It belonged to the NatWest Bank, and NatWest Bank was the first bank in London to start using a computer. It took up a whole floor of their building. And when we went in there to see it, I remember seeing rows and rows of cabinets lining this room and going all the way down the middle of this room. And every cabinet had in it 3 or 4 inner cabinets, all with tapes that seemed to be going backwards and forwards. And I remember thinking, wow, this is amazing. This is the future. It took up this whole floor. Now, if you think about your mobile phone these days, so your mobile phone, like most mobile phones, it's probably got 64 gig of memory, something like that. You know, some of them have still got 16 or 32, but a lot of memory. So, you know, a gig. I mean, you know, I'm not a techie, but, you know, what is a gig? How many bits are there in a gig? Yeah, do you know? I don't know off the top of my head, but what I do know is that when I went to visit that computer when I was 14 years old, that entire floor of the NatWest building, the computer that took up that whole floor, the memory of that computer was 1 bit. And my mobile phone has got 64 gig of memory. That's amazing, isn't it? And that's in 50 years. So in 50 years, we've gone from that to this. So those kids that you're teaching at the moment, those children that are 5, 7, 9, even 14, by the time they're adults, what skills are they going to need? What's life going to be like for them? We don't really know, do we? And this is where I find FLP the most useful. My name's Carole Ritchie, and apart from many other things that I do, I am an FLP practitioner, and I'm one of Anne Jersh's FLP practitioner trainers. So I run courses to enable people to become fully accredited and certificated FLP practitioners. It's a 3-day course, an amazing course. Anne Jersh, who developed and founded FLP and has written several best-selling books about the subject, she devised this course brilliantly to make it an excellent course in 3 days. At the end of that 3 days, basically, after a few case studies and a bit of coaching and mentoring by one of us trainers, myself and my courses, then you are a certificated and fully accredited FLP practitioner and can use that in your practice if you're a coach or a therapist. Or the other thing that's being developed at the moment is enabling people to use that with children. And Dr. John Rowe, who's also an FLP practitioner, and myself has very kindly given us the responsibility of developing FLP to use for children. And we're going to be putting on a 2-day follow-up course. So anybody who is a qualified FLP practitioner will be able to apply to be on the course for using FLP with children. It will include child protection training and lots of tips about working with schools and all sorts of things like that. Now, from my perspective, having worked in education for many years and seen how this type of timeline stuff can benefit young people, I want to see more and more teachers taking advantage of doing this with their youngsters. I have got an amazing, very true story that I tell everybody that will listen because it's just a fantastic success story. Many years ago, when I was still a head teacher, a young lad, age 16, who was leaving school, basically he'd messed about his whole way through school. He hadn't taken anything about school seriously. He didn't think he needed to, actually. I think he thought that he was going to leave school, work for his dad and everything would be fine. But in the last year that he was at school, all sorts of things went wrong for him and his family. And he began to realise that slipping into a job, working for his dad wasn't going to be an option. And he'd also got himself into a bit of trouble and lots of things were going wrong for him in his very last year. And his mum asked me if I would see him as a therapist, because he was no longer one of my pupils, which I did. And we did some timeline stuff. And I took him forward into his future so that he could see what difference there would be if he carried on the way he was going or if he did something different. What he saw was if he just tweaked a few things and basically learnt a few things and became a bit more sensible, he saw what a fantastic life he could have. And during this experience, what he saw for himself were several weird things that were a surprise to him at the time. And I remember him being really quite surprised that he was seeing all this. For instance, he saw himself getting his first car and said, "Oh, it's a bit old banger." And I said, "Well, that's okay, it's your first car, that's fine." Being a 16-year-old lad, he was sort of into cars and stuff. Then he saw himself going on holiday with his mates and finding himself a fiancé and being really happy and getting his first flat for himself. And then what he saw himself doing was working as a carpenter, which he hadn't thought of before. And at one point in his future, he saw himself making something. I remember him saying, "This is weird. It's like I've made something that isn't going to stay there. I've made something just for people to look at for a little while, but everybody's walking through it and sort of under it." And it was a bit confusing. So I just said, "Well, hang on to that. Just remember it." And then he saw himself being really successful, having his own business and getting himself his first really, really good car. And while we were doing this timeline stuff, he actually went, "Oh, it's an old man's car." So I asked him, "Why do you think it's an old man's car?" And he said, "It's got a walnut dash. It's a black saloon car with a walnut dash." And we both laughed about that. He then, a few weeks later, phoned me up and asked me, begged me, in fact, if he could come back to school for a year. And I had to get permission to do that, managed to do it. He came back to school for a year. His life completely changed. It totally changed. Now, fast forward many, many years, and he has a very successful business, working as a bespoke carpenter, and he does a lot of work for exhibitions. Now, at one point, a few years ago, he was asked to create the entrance piece for the exhibition in Birmingham, for the construction industry exhibition. And what he did was exactly what he saw in his timeline therapy years ago. He actually made an archway out of wooden blocks, sort of that fitted into each other, a bit like the game Jenga, that went up into a beautiful ornate arch. So everybody that entered that exhibition was walking under it and through it just as he saw. The other strange thing that happened, and this was about 4 years ago now, he phoned me up and asked me if he could come and see me, because I kept in touch with him, as I have done with lots of my ex-pupils. And he said, "Can I come and see you?" So I said, yeah, what's up? And he went, "Oh, it's okay." He said, "I just need a little bit of business advice." Because this was when he was expanding his own business. And he came along and he phoned me up and said, "I'm outside. I can see your car." And I said, "Okay, come in." And he went, "No, I want you to come outside, miss." Strange how they still call you miss, isn't it? And so I went outside, and there he was, leaning on a nice shiny black saloon Mercedes. And he opened the door and pointed inside at the walnut dash. So everything he saw happened. Now, that's a success story. I'm very, very proud of Charlie, very proud of him. That's an amazing success story. And there's lots and lots of others that from me and all the other FLP practitioners can tell you. The bottom line is taking, especially teenagers, into their future has a very positive effect on them. But back to you, and back to looking at the future of education. How do we know what they need? How do we know what we need to teach them? And how do we know what sort of skills they're going to need? Well, the honest answer is we don't. So let's have a look. Let's have a look into their future. Let's have a look into the future of education. I'm going to make a follow-on video from this, which is a guided meditation to take you into the future of education and have a look. Have a look to see what it is you need to teach your pupils right now. So click on the next video and have a look. Make sure that it's a time when you've got plenty of time, that you're not going to be disturbed, and that you can sit calmly and relax and go into a guided meditation and experience FLP for yourself. and have a look at the future of British education. See you in a little while.